Freedom of the press is often hailed as the cornerstone of democracy, yet it becomes the first casualty in times of war. For Israel, which has long embraced occupation and the suffering of the Palestinians as the cornerstone of its policy and philosophy, any crime committed always has to be concealed. Now Israel tightens its grip not only on the land, but on the truth, attempting to silence journalists to hide the extent of its actions, even on Israeli media. This isn't just a war on Gaza, it's a war on accountability. As the suffering of Gazan civilians intensifies, we ask, what price does the truth pay when the press is silenced? Welcome to Think Tank. Haaretz has reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's control over its media threatens its democratic foundation. This week, targeted critical outlets like Haaretz and the public broadcaster Kan, aiming to cut government support and privatize the latter, all in an effort to suppress dissent. Netanyahu, with the help of his communications minister Shlomo Khari, seeks to transform independent media into tools of government propaganda. This erosion of press freedom is especially dangerous in wartime, when a free and critical media is vital for a healthy democracy. Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich has proposed a controversial plan to reduce Gaza's population by half within 2 years through what he described as voluntary migration. Speaking at a conference organized by the Israeli Settlements Council, Smotrich also called for the reoccupation of the Gaza Strip, reiterating his hardline stance on the region. The remarks have drawn sharp criticism from Palestinian leaders and international human rights organizations who have condemned the proposal as a very violating of human rights, balance actually, and a dangerous escalation in the ongoing conflict. More than 10,000 tents in Gaza's Qnews have been blown away by strong winds and rain, forcing displaced civilians to move their tents to areas from the beach in very difficult conditions. Director of the health programs in Gaza stated that the citizens lack winter clothes, heat and blankets in light of the significant drop in temperature. He also noted that the spread of famine in the Strip and the percentage of children suffering from malnutrition reached 40% in the south. And for more analysis, here on our show, we're joined by Dr. Nasser, a political science professor from occupied Jerusalem. Very warm welcome, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you with us to discuss this contentious issue. Dr. Mekki, the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics has reported that since October the 7th, 184 journalists have been killed. How do you interpret this ongoing violence against journalists? What concrete steps can the international community take to ensure accountability and protect journalists operating in conflict zones, sir? And really, sir, this is a very, very serious situation.
Yes, good evening. Just I want to make a correction for your numbers. It's about 157 journalists that have been killed from the last, that's year.
You mean
October
184? They have 150 something?
No. Yes, it's 157 from 2023, from the 7th of October. It's also journalists that have been killed in Lebanon, as you know. And before that, you remember the famous journalist from Al Jazeera channel, Shireen Abu Akleh. She has been killed in Jenin, as you know, when the Israeli was invasion Jenin in that time. It's before the 7th of October. For the impact, that's what is the influence of the killing the journalists. Why Israel is killing the journalists? Israeli want to, not allow to anybody to know about the truth. What Israel is doing in Gaza and also in Lebanon, but especially in Gaza. That's from 1945, when Israeli started in 1947. Also, they killed many of the foreign journalists, and it's continue in order to, that's to hide the truth from all the people in the war.
Sir, could they hide the truth on the ground?
Yes, they could hide the truth on the ground. Yes, they have many things, actions on the ground. They could do it. They first of all,
could, but they didn't, sir.
What?
They could, but they didn't, because everyone knows the truth.
Yes. Yeah, continue.
Okay, I'll leave you there, sir, and I'll move on to Peter Rove. A very warm welcome, sir. A writer in American magazine. Very welcome, sir. And sir, with Israel imposing sanctions on Harads, is this a sign of a broader trend toward restricting freedom of expression under the justification of wartime conditions, sir?
I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. There is a long tradition of democratic states imposing restrictions on a free press in times of war. It conflicts certainly with the American concept that Congress shall make, Congress shall make no law restricting freedom of the press. But we saw it in World War II. We saw it in World War I. It was exercised in a soft way in the Cold War to keep things secret that the government felt should be secret. It's one of those tensions that exist in democratic societies. And we have to always be vigilant that we don't allow suppression to interfere with the people's right to know, but we also don't want to endanger troops in the field or reveal state secrets that would be harmful to warfighters.
Okay, sir, what role can international media outlets play in countering the Israeli government's narrative and ensuring balanced reporting on the Gaza crisis, which is, of course, the right of every single person that lives in the globe?
Well, they should be independent reporting entirely. No one should be accepting any of the narratives, whether it's coming from Hamas or from the Israeli government. This is a time, and I say this from somebody who sits in the comfort of his rocking chair and writes opinion column. But if you want to cover a war, you have to go out and cover a war, and it's a dangerous thing.
How should we cover this war, sir, from your own perspective?
I'm sorry?
How do you see the war should be covered?
Well, I've been fortunate enough that I've never been called up to do war reporting. So I
Your
think it would
knowledge
be,
about war reporting, sir.
well, my knowledge about war reporting comes from reading about people like Ernie Pyle, the famous wire service journalist who covered the Second World War and is a hero of mine and was known as the GI journalist. And that means getting out in the field, getting in with the troops, as my good friend Martin Walker did during the first Gulf War while I was doing domestic political
Perfect,
reporting
sir.
for
What you're
United Press
referring to
International.
is that whatever happens, even if the Israeli government decides to ban what's taking place in the Gaza Strip, history will write with what's happening, and everybody's going to know by time.
Well, I think history should cover every aspect, but as we know, the winners get to write the history and the losers go home.
Exactly, sir.
I
The
think it's
losers go
important.
home.
I think it's important for every reporter who wants to cover this story to be out in the field in Gaza, talking to people, talking to troops, talking to combatants on both sides. That's how you're going to present a balanced story. You're
Perfect,
not
sir. I'll
going to
leave
get a balanced story
I'll leave it there, and I'll be back again. Dr.
good.
Makki, how has the restriction on media freedom in Gaza hindered efforts to document crimes against Palestinians, and what implications did this have for future accountability, sir?
Yes, I think it will be influenced on the accountability in the future, but it will, that for the restriction of the media, it will be very dangerous because the people, and even in all the world, they're watching what's happening in Gaza. So that means if you hide or you don't allow to the media to cover what's happening there, that mean you will kill the truth, and nobody will know what happened there, like a massacre, like the starvation, like what's happening now in Gaza. And also, I will tell you something. There is about 8 times that is not allow even for the Israeli journalists to interfere in this. Like, that's the people, the kidnapper in Gaza, the military operation, and also the meeting inside the cabinet, and also the emergency from 1945. So this is all the topics that even the Israeli didn't allow to the journalists the Israeli journalists to interfere and also to know what's happening inside Gaza.
Perfect,
Uh,
sir.
if you want, if you want to go ahead with in Gaza, like what Israel now is doing, it will hide the truth and all from the world, like what's happening in Gaza. Try to kill, that the son of the journalist, of the Al Jazeera journalist, reporter, and also many of the like Ismail Ghul and also the other. So the Israeli government, from this point, they could, that's make
Sir,
many
at this,
things in order
I
to.
have to tell you at this point, they are still not able to ban anything and everything. Everybody knows and everybody watches, at least through social media. There's Facebook, there's Instagram that we watch everything on. Despite the
Yes,
fact
I
that they're
know.
still
I
trying
know.
to ban this on social media.
Yeah, I know, but it is not all the truth. It's not nothing. It's not all for the truth that or the action that happening in Gaza. We don't know about what they are doing in Gaza, the Israeli troops, and also also the people. Sometimes we could know about their situation, like the starvation, like what now they are suffering from the cold, from the war. That things happen there. We don't know about it. And that's even from the Israeli point of view, from the Israeli journalists, they not the government, the extreme government, did not allow even for the Israeli journalists, which they are closing to the the troop inside Gaza, they didn't allow them to publish what's happening there because
But
it will be
sir, then
really
the
very
facts.
criminal.
I'll go to Peter. Peter, from the perspective of the Western media, how does the Israeli government targeting platforms like Haaretz, which is a newspaper, an Israeli newspaper, reflect its fear of the reality of the war on Gaza being exposed, and why?
I think it reflects badly. I have no tolerance for any government that seeks to suppress press freedom
Exactly, sir. Who has tolerance, sir?
Well, apparently somebody does if they're to close down this newspaper.
Because they're doing genocide, sir, and atrocities. Well, what are they supposed to do?
Well, I think that fortunately, at least for the historical record, and now for the conflicts as we cover them, whether we're talking about what's going on in Gaza, we're talking about what's going on in Ukraine. There are plenty of people out there who have devices that record in real time things that are happening. And they have ways of disseminating that information that don't require them to be in a newspaper or on a television. And when it comes to the kinds of atrocities that you refer, it is our salvation. I can imagine that if we'd had cell phones in the 1930s and 40s, it would have been much harder for the Germans to have gotten away with the death camps. It would have been much harder to have kept them hidden from the world. And it
Sir,
would have
really so proud of
conversation.
every word you're saying, and going back to the history and the 30s and 40s and what has been happening, which assures that everything will be known. Sir, can you please stay with us before we continue our discussion? Let's take a closer look at Israel's crackdown on press freedoms, which has raised global concerns over its democratic integrity.
Following October 7, 2023, Israel significantly curtailed press freedoms, raising concerns about its commitment to democratic values. A key example is the Israeli government's sanctions on Haaretz, Israel's oldest newspaper, which criticized the war and demanded accountability. This move reflects a broader effort to control media narratives, particularly regarding Gaza. Israel's measures to suppress critical outlets, including Haaretz, are part of a wider strategy to silence dissent. The Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, highlights the increased number of journalists being targeted. It has condemned Israel's actions, citing the deaths of at least 20 journalists since the war began, along with widespread injuries and detentions. Suppressive measures damage independent reporting, weakening democratic oversight, and creating a media environment dominated by government-approved narratives. This aggression not only silences vital journalism, but also undermines global efforts to expose the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Internationally, Israel's restrictions also hinder foreign journalists' ability to report from Gaza, limiting rights violations. The International Press Institute, IPI, has called for global action to ensure the protection of journalists and accurate reporting. Israel's crackdown on press freedom signals a troubling trend of undermining democracy both domestically and globally. As Israel's media crackdown persists, the military campaign continues with less international scrutiny. This poses serious questions about Palestinian rights and the global community's responsibility to demand accountability. With a long history of targeting journalists, Israel's actions reflect an increasing shift toward authoritarianism. The international community act to protect journalists and for Gaza is not silenced.
We're back again. Peter, most of the news with regards to Gaza is through social media, although it is still restricted on purpose, sir, on all platforms. Your narrative, sir.
You can't have a free society without at least a modicum of press freedom. And to the extent that anyone is interfering with the transfer of information to the rest of the world about what's happening right now in Gaza is a disservice to the democratic cause.
Sir, is there a risk that the crackdown on press freedom within Israel, its allies, especially in the West, who value democratic principles supposedly?
I would hope so. As I said.
So, you said, quoting, I would hope so.
I would hope that it would create a point of friction. We take our First Amendment rights here in the American media community very seriously. People go to jail in defense of our First Amendment rights as reporters and commentators. Not the infringement on our ability to exercise those rights is not something that we can let go lightly. I talk to journalists in Belarus, Ukraine, and the Balkans, and I think about people like Jimmy Lai, who's in a Chinese prison camp or a Chinese jail right now because he's a newspaper publisher who published unfavorable stories about the Beijing regime, and he's in jail in Hong Kong. And for keeping people informed about what the new national security law does. There is no freedom without a press.
Okay, Dr. Makki, do you think Israel's strategy of silencing voices could backfire domestically, especially in terms of long-term political stability?
Yes, I think so.
You think so? Perfect, sir.
Yeah, yes, I think so.
Okay, how do you think so, sir?
Look, for this matter, about you mean when we are talking about what's happening there, we are talking about the freedom of democracy even in Israel. I want just to raise a point here. Maybe nobody knows about this, is that Israeli is depending on their reputation of the democracy in the Middle East. This is one thing that Israeli is depending on this in order to be as one of the big partnership for the Western countries, especially in the United States of America. So that I studied in the Hebrew University, my PhD there, and I know about the Israeli what they are thinking, and I know that in that time they respect the democracy. When I was there before 20 years ago, now that it's something changed from after this extreme, that extreme government, and everything is changed in Israel. Even when the the former Minister of Justice, Yossi Beilin, he said that what's happening in Israel, he is not surprised with the decision of that's boycott about Haaretz newspaper. But it is the detrimental of the democracy inside Israel. Many of
Okay,
the academic.
Peter, is Netanyahu's government's attempt to stifle freedom of the press in Israel part of a larger scheme to undermine his country's supposedly democratic system, especially given his previous onslaught on the independence of the judiciary?
No, I think it's an ill-considered wartime measure. Governments in wartime are always sensitive to how wars are covered and to what information is allowed out into public. This is one of the tensions that exists in the democratic system. It's one of the tensions that's supposed to exist in a democratic system. The government has a responsibility to fight a war and to keep troops safe, and the press has the responsibility to report on that war and to tell people what's
Sir,
going
but
on, and to tell people
what
whether
we
they're winning
read
or
now
losing.
is that the press wants to reveal, but Netanyahu doesn't want this to happen. This is the case in Israel now with Israeli press.
I'm not sure I'm qualified to give you a specific yes or no answer on that specific question, but I'm just that this is a healthy tension.
No, sir, this
Because
is not a question that I'm asking. It is a statement that was by the Haaretz that has reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's increasing control over Israel's media threatens its democratic foundation. So it's not a question, sir. It's a statement.
Well, you're asking me to respond to their statement, and
Yes.
as I said, I'm not sure I'm qualified to give an intelligent response. And so I will just say generally that this is part of the healthy tension that exists in a free society between
Okay,
what
sir.
the
So you think it's
government
part of a
governs.
free? It's you see it's okay, sir. Okay, because I have to wrap up this episode.
Again, I didn't say it was okay.
What
I'm
did
just
you
saying
say,
that
sir?
the tension that exists is a healthy tension
Okay.
because it means there are the
Oh.
right to press freedom also carries with it
It's nobody's
responsibility.
right, sir.
Well, I would disagree with you there. I think
Okay,
we do
sir.
have
Very sorry. I want to continue, of course, this very interesting discussion between, of course, both of you parties. I had a wonderful time. And, of course, sir, any crime committed always has to be concealed, unfortunately. And, of course, when it's Benjamin Netanyahu, then it has to be concealed. That was Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, political science professor from occupied Jerusalem, and Mr. Peter Rove, a writer in American Magazine and Newsweek from Washington. Thank you very much both for your intellectual knowledge and your informative insights. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates from Qnews.